I'm supposed to be a drug addict. I'm supposed to have been a juvenile delinquent. I'm supposed to have a very low level of education and a low-income job. Statistically speaking, that's what I'm supposed to have. I'm not supposed to be standing here. There's this one type of secrets where we're glad that society does not know about. But then there's this other type of secret where society prefers not to know about. Domestic violence comes our ways in various forms. It can be active, it can be passive, it can be visible and less visible. Physical violence, obviously being the most visible. But then there's also psychological, emotional, sexual, or even violence in economic terms. The fact that the latter forms are not visible on the outside does not mean that the scars it leaves are less deep. Then there's domestic violence on children. That fits even more in both categories of secrets than domestic violence among the adults, for various reasons. And as you can imagine, that also means that very, very little is reported about, and that it's very difficult to find data. Still, I'd like to share with you a couple of facts on that. According to a 2010 study by the European Agency of Fundamental Rights, they interviewed about 42,000 women. 35% said they had experienced some type of violence before the age of 16. Ladies and gentlemen, that would mean that here in this room, more than 3 out of 10 know exactly what I'm talking about. And the probability is high that also among your childhood friends, some were affected. And there are no exceptions. It's happening right now somewhere, just as I'm speaking to you. And it's happening from north to south, from east to west. It happens in less developed countries, but in developed countries too. And it happens throughout all social classes. So how can we even talk about it being a secret if 1/3 of the population is affected? It's an open secret that more often than not, society is well aware of. And it's a big dilemma. So this privacy that we see as such a valuable good and such a privilege can be totally counterproductive, even putting lives at risk if respected in the wrong moment. I'd like to look at the consequences of all that with you. What does it mean if we keep that secret and don't look at it? Well, children who experience domestic violence are much more likely to become frightened as adults, to feel powerless and helpless. And despite a long list of further negative behaviors, what frightens me most is that it's the single best predictor for adult violence too. Yeah, that means that if they experienced violence during their childhood, they're much more likely to be violent themselves as adults too. being myself part of those 35% affected. When I was a child, I would do everything possible to hide that. From time to time, I'd pretend I've had a fight with the neighbor's cat in order to explain scars. I'd pretend I was much more clumsy than I actually am, just in order to explain bruises. I was extremely creative in finding explanations. Having grown up at the time where the internet was not in all households, as we do have it today, and with this situation that it's supposed to be a secret and society does not like to look at it, what were the options? The options of finding a benchmark whether what was going on was right or wrong, let alone finding ways how to escape it. But even worse, I knew that some people knew exactly what was going on. And I also knew that they did not want to talk about, because having to share that secret of mine with me would have put them in an uncomfortable situation. Then, one day, I was 16 years old. The police came and took me away from my parents' place. They had lost custody of me, and the physical abuse finally came to an end. Life was hard, though. I had lots of new struggles. I had to manage my life, and suddenly I found myself with multiple jobs in order to survive financially even. But I did not give up. I wanted to finish my apprenticeship. And at times, I would work on 5 jobs, day and night, because there's only one thing I knew. Education would be the key to my independence. Yeah, while not everything worked perfectly and I was very busy, I kept going. I thought things would start to get better. I thought. Well, then the next big thing came. One evening, my boyfriend at that time, and he had been with me while I left my parents' place, he came and he broke up with me. And he did that by saying, "Oh, well, you know, I spoke with my parents and I'm supposed to be in the best time of my life. I'm supposed to be having fun and I should not spend time with someone who is always stressed and busy and so sad as you are." Whoa. Well, as I told you, I was fighting so hard to make it. I could not understand. My heart was broken. But at the same time, I could totally relate to what he was saying. It's that picture of the teenager that suffers domestic violence and then becomes a drug addict himself, becomes a juvenile delinquent, even worse, the teenage girl that gets pregnant. That's the picture that we get promoted so often in movies. There were also people who did believe in me. And looking back, today I know that in some way they saved me. One of those being my boss at that time. When she learned about what had happened to me, she immediately told me that she would do everything possible in order to support me. And again, she told me too, education is important. Please stay. Yeah, I think she really saved me. Because at the time where Nobody else was there. She would give me a reason, someone I did not want to disappoint. Luckily, I not only finished my apprenticeship, I even finished it as one of the best in class. And after that, I realized that I had grown stronger. But although I had grown stronger, there were still all those feelings in me. I thought I don't deserve good things. I felt powerless and helpless. Until one day, I decided that I would shake this off. It may sound easy right now as I'm telling it to you, but it was a long period with many ups and downs. To give you a formula, you can count at least 1 year per letter. And yes, that means that I spent about 10 years literally shaking on the inside. I'd observe myself, how I behave. I started to observe others because I thought there were so many things they had naturally learned at home, communication skills, how to behave in a situation of conflict, how to do that constructively. I wanted to be what's considered a normal person so much that I really kept working hard in order to shake that off. I was just so strongly determined not to let my past negatively influence my future. It wasn't always easy, and mainly because of how society looks at it. I remember once I was at a party and I was talking to this guy. He was a psychologist, it turns out. I got really curious. And I asked him, well, what do you think? What are the probabilities, in your opinion, that people who suffered domestic violence as children, will they live a normal life as adults? His answer came straight away, and he was very clear about that the chances were very low that that happens. He told me, well, they lack the basic tools of communicating, they freak out in conflict situations, they have very low levels of education and therefore just end up at the bottom of society. Oh, so had I just been very lucky? I never saw myself as an exception or as a particularly strong person. But it made me think. And I just realized again how strong that impact was of having had someone who did believe in me. One person once chose to take care of me, and that made my life take a direction that, statistically seen, very few take. If you belong to those 65% in this room, ladies and gentlemen, those who think they're not affected, I'm very sorry. I have to tell you that we're all affected. The big problem with domestic violence is that we're all affected. Needless to say that the perpetrators need help. Very clearly, part of the problem already starts here. But it's also in how society treats those affected. Very often, leading to self-fulfilling prophecies. I have a big disclaimer here. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't want you to walk out of here and think of every teenager or child you meet that if he's strange and he doesn't behave in a way you think is normal, that he's suffering domestic violence. No. Quite the opposite can be true. Children and teenagers often develop mechanisms of hiding it, and they appear very normal on the outside. But I want you to consider that maybe by reaching out, by offering someone to share a secret with you, you may be that one person making a difference in someone else's life. And that's why I'm standing here today. I'm sharing the secret with you because I want many more of those 35% to make it. And I'd like to close with a quote. It's much easier to build strong children than to fix broken adults. Thank you.